Well, welcome to this week. I'm Reverend Brian Merritt, and I'm talking about Occupy, both Occupy DC, Occupy in a greater sense that's the national and international movement, protest chaplains, and also we have a new organization here that's interfaith, that's religious occupiers in DC. So I just wanted to talk about why it's important for me to be a part of the Occupy movement. A little biographical note: I've been involved in many social justice oriented movements over the past. Here in the district, I have been one of the people who was part of Clergy United for LGBTQ, gay and lesbian marriages. I testified in the city council for that. I've also been part of many anti-war groups, civil rights groups in the South when I was in Louisiana as a pastor. So I've been a part of many of these groups. And my whole ministry has been centered around issues of poverty, homelessness, and violence. We we're looking, my wife and I, who is also a clergy. I'm ordained Presbyterian, but I'm here in an ecumenical church, a post-denominational church called the Palisades Community Church. I was looking online after I had read the declaration from OWS, Occupy Wall Street. And as opposed to a lot of what I've heard in the press about how chaotic things are and how disorganized and leaderless, it was pretty interesting to me that in a 2 week period, a group of people that don't usually get the highest amount of esteem in our society, especially from their socioeconomic or their age group, within a 2 week period, they put together a list of demands by consensus. That's pretty amazing in any movement sense. Any movement that in the United States that we've looked at, it takes years. I think it was 3 years before the civil rights movement actually did the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And most people can't even remember what the name of that march was. Nevertheless, some of the points that they wanted, which are some of the same points still, like redistribution of wealth, the idea that some people that are African American might have jobs, access to jobs, and also statehood for the District of Columbia. And we're still fighting for that, unfortunately, here in the district. So I Googled the name, I Googled Occupy DC, and I saw that there was actually an Occupy group, and it had been set up on October 1st, and so I decided that I was going to go down there and take blankets and gloves and pillows and whatever that I could to help support them. I brought down hot tea. And at that time, there weren't very many people in the park in McPherson Square. There were no more than probably 7 people sleeping on the concrete. And at the General Assembly meetings, which is their decision-making, consensus-building process, there was no more than 20 people. So it was pretty clear from that initial stage that they really were needing to set up committees like outreach. And since I was a clergy and many, many times the only clergy, outreach seemed to make sense. We were hugely inundated with the press after the pepper spraying in Wall Street. And so the few of us who had ever talked to press kind of got put into a press pool, and we talked. I mean, in a 2 day period, I probably talked to 13 media outlets. So it was one of those things that grew. I didn't really have a whole lot of time to think about it. It was sort of out of my views of helping the poor. I've thought a lot about the passage that foxes have their hole, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, and that is what these people were doing. A good portion of them were under 35 and had no job, and so they were occupying a park. And they were in parks with a lot of homeless people. The other thing that, in a religious aspect, I was able to help set up with the help of some other people of faith, especially the Jewish community, Occupy Judaism, uh, the protest chaplains. And we had more at the beginning. There were a few of um, the people locally that we would know that would do such things, but not much religious presence. We tried to have a people of faith meeting. Um, we did Muslim prayer, Friday prayer, Jummah on Friday. We brought people out for that. The Jewish community did sukkah and had a booth out there. We've also had many other prayer vigils. The IFC's president, Dr. Holness, came out and did a prayer vigil as well. But by and large, the religious community has not really been a huge part of the Occupy movement, much to my great despair and sadness. Partially because in a direct democratic movement, it it really is a voice that's needed and a voice that people continually say, Pastor, why aren't there any religious people out here? Why aren't there any religious people out here? Um, and I think that sometimes it's hard to translate because this is such a flattened structure. There's nobody that will give you permission. And oftentimes in the religious communities, we want to have permission to do the things that we do. We want somebody who's an authority to say, oh, it's okay for you to go out in the park and have worship. Well, no one is going to stop you from doing that in Occupy. I've also been a part of the larger protest chaplain discussions about how they're going to work in national sense. And we're working on maybe a 6-month plan. We also set up here with the interfaith groups a religious Occupy in DC group. And that group meets ever so often. We coordinated a Thanksgiving dinner for 300 of the occupiers at New York Avenue Presbyterian Church as well. But again, it's one of those things where we can really use the input of a greater amount of religious voices, um, and it's part of the reason that it's important is because all of these things that the people that are down there in the park, the redress that they want, are things that all religious leaders should have a stake in, because their members are the people whose houses are being foreclosed upon by banks unfairly because of fraudulent loans and mortgage-backed securities. These protesters now are actually trying to stop houses from being taken away. There's issues of power and powerlessness. There's issues of disenfranchisement. There's issues of homelessness. In the district right now, we're not really clear whether there will be enough houses for the homeless in winter, especially families who are homeless, because the council and the mayor have not given us a very clear sign. So there's very many things that are issues that religious leaders could bring to the table to talk about. Um, and I think that that's what's at center here. It's not about someone who is going to get the most accolades, because that's just not what this movement's about. It's about recognizing that a huge amount of people are left out in power. And sometimes that might be an internal thing for us to witness to ourselves. How many of those 99% who are left out of political power are left out of religious power as well? And I think that if we were really honest with ourselves, we would say there might be a huge amount of elitism within our own religious institutions as well. And those things need to recognize the 99% who do not have power. So thank you for letting me talk to you, and I hope that the discussion goes absolutely fantastic this week, and hope to see you at Occupy.